You're still watching the AM show. We will have some procurement conversations before we bring you sports. Why do we keep committing procurement blunders as if there's no law to regulate our activities? Just look at this Ghana Football Association issue of flying supporters to Congo. Why should someone go through the tender process, win the contract, only for someone else to execute? Things like these have brought to the fore the need to have an annual procurement and supply chain summit. This year's summit is under the theme Advancing the Frontiers of Procurement and Supply Chain Management Systems in Ghana. Here's an interview some procurement experts on the summit granted.
I know you probably have heard a lot about procurement. It's become like a word that is very common in the Ghanaian media today. You hear a lot about procurement. Your office probably, they talk about procurement, talk about supply chain and all, but probably you may have one or two questions you need cleared about procurement. And trust me, this morning you get the opportunity to get some answers about what procurement entails, and there's something interesting coming up that has to do with procurement, and I've got three strong people who are experts in that field. They would help us get some answers to that. I've been joined by, from my extreme left, Dr. Ted Afote Walters. He's the head procurement and supply chain management. And then we also have in the middle Joyce Ikuyama, who is principal procurement and supply chain manager at the Ministry of Trade and Industry. And next to me is Ebenezer Isilfi Bading. He's the chief procurement and supply chain manager at the Finance Ministry. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me start with you, Doc. Since you are head of procurement, we often hear a lot about procurement. I mean, for the layman, he thinks, okay, procurement, okay, if my office needs furniture, procurement, Abby, or is not?
Thank you very much, and good morning to your listeners and viewers. Procurement and supply chain management, in our context, is about providing solution to whatever you wanted to have, to use, and spend your money on. So think about the whole government structure, especially in the civil service. Whatever the government, through the civil service, wants to spend money on, then we procurement and supply chain professionals will have to provide that solution to make sure that they have very good value for what they spend the money on. So basically, this is all about procurement.
So in effect, government, let's say government wants to get X, they have to make sure, you procurement experts will have to make sure that this X we are getting, this particular type of X we are getting, is value for money.
Exactly. Our position is whatever the government wants through the civil service institutions, we will have to work with the requisitioners who, or the users who will be using these products and services, to help develop the kind of specification for the product or service they want. And then we would have to source around the country or the world over to make sure that we get a very good deal in terms of having a very fair competitiveness, ensuring there's transparency, improving putting our integrity on the line, and making sure that whatever returns will come without any abuse or challenge to the way government spends money, to make sure that whatever money government had to spend is spent judiciously, and then it's to the benefit of the people of the country.
Okay, so Joyce, am I right if I assume that as procurement experts, you more or less keep the budget in check?
Of course, we do keep the budget in check, and we make sure that all monies that are spent within the budget area, and it falls within budget.
Is there enough education out there for the average man when it comes to procurement and supply chain, do you think?
Currently, we, the Procurement and Supply Chain Management Division of the Civil Service, we are trying to create this awareness through our various ministries and through the public service to get this into the public domain.
And Ebenezer, let me talk a bit. We've heard a lot about procurement law. I mean, it's been said often, and even those of us in the media, we tend to use it to bully people a lot when we are talking. We say, but the procurement law says, but the procurement law says. Is the procurement law really working?
I'll pick it from the angle of, yes, it is working. However, there are a bit of things that requires upgrade. Hence, the Public Procurement Authority has kickstarted the process to do a review of the public procurement law. So as far as all procurement activities undertaken by the government is concerned, it has to be done according to the tenets of the public procurement law.
So walk us through, for instance, if your ministry, the finance ministry, for instance, wants to do some procurement, walk us through the procedure you have to probably go through.
Okay. The starting point of any procurement activity is procurement planning. And the public procurement law makes it very clear that the procurement planning activities should have been concluded at least prior to the submission of the draft budget to the Parliament. And so the procurement process kickstarts with the procurement planning. Once the planning is done and Parliament has approved the final budget, the Parliament issues what is called the appropriation bill. That is to say, that is what the government is going to allocate his resources towards in the coming year. And once appropriation is passed, the procurement plan that was done ought to be reviewed to reflect how much the government is willing to spend on various activities. So once that phase has been crossed, the next phase is for the procurement and supply chain department or unit of the respective organizations to trigger the procurement process by either meeting or requesting from the user department whether the things they requested for are due. In that, in the procurement planning process, there is a column for when the items are expected to be delivered. So often you would want to find out from them whether really that need still exists or that need has been satisfied one way or the other. So once that phase has been crossed, then the next phase is to prepare and issue your respective tender documents. And let me put it plain. We have more or less two broad categorization of procurement that is done: competitive and non-competitive. I would put them into those two broad categorizations. By the competitive, we're talking about restricted tendering and non-restricted tendering.
Okay.
And then we have the non-competitive, where we'll talk about single sourcing or sole sourcing or direct sourcing. So
okay, but before you go further, break down the restricted and the non-restricted tendering for us, because we know there's a tender process, yes, but we need, what about the restrictive and then the non-restricted one?
The restricted means that it is open to only a selected few who might have gone through a pre-assessment process, technically called a pre-qualification exercise. So once the supplier has been pre-qualified, the person merits being used for that particular process.
Okay. And
often the restricted tendering are meant for items that are of highly technical and complex nature. For example, the design of the buoy dam. It's not any project that you can just get anybody to execute. Yeah. You require people of a particular caliber to be able to execute. So that such a project may go through a restricted tendering process. And then we have the competitive one, which is open to all potential and capable suppliers. Okay. So those ones may not necessarily go through any pre-qualification exercise. It would be open for all those who are capable to execute.
Doc, it sounds like a very lengthy process, and some have actually blamed it at saying that that's what breeds corruption sometimes in the tendering or the procurement process.
Thank you very much. We at this side of the process think that it is not cumbersome. It can be quite interesting if, just as Eben said earlier, if you have to develop a plan and follow through the plan, then you might see that the procurement process can be done within a very short time. And one of the things we wanted to achieve as a department for government is to reduce the man hours that is spent on these kind of transactions. We acknowledge that some processes had gone on and could go up to about 6 months, and then it's cancelled and it's started all over again. We disagree, because we think that with open competitive process, the maximum you should go should be hovering around 6 weeks, and it's achievable. It's really realistic. Yes, within 6 weeks, a contract should be awarded, and then a startup meeting should have already kicked in already. And these are some of the things we're trying to help our colleagues to understand and to move forward with, because we think that we've gotten to a stage that we need to redefine the procurement identity and help to impact government business.
How do you intend to redefine it?
What we have to do is just simply sit to rethink through the way things are done and see how best we can innovate to improve in terms of delivering better deals to our internal clients, and making sure that there are no challenges and disputes along the solicitation process till award. And thus we've been educating ourselves for the past 2 years. And I must say that we have had a few feedback which is showing remarkable improvement. But then we think that the more we expose ourselves to some of these successes, the challenge is then the expectation on us is more, and we need to do a bit more. So yes, we're ready to keep going to help improve the bottlenecks that happen in the process. We believe that come next year, procurement should be playing a dominant role in terms of the way government businesses run and managed.
I'll come back to you, and even also in a bit. I know you have a summit coming up later today, but Joyce, what do you think accounts for the bottlenecks that people experience when they are going through the procurement process? Because, like Doc said, it's possible to get it within 6 weeks, but people will complain that, oh, me, I've been doing 6 months plus. What really is accounting for that?
Thank you. I think we have a bit of a challenge of interferences, and another is the people who come to bid, that means the suppliers and the tenders, are normally not familiar with the processes that they have to go through. So I think those are the bottlenecks that get people.
Okay, so ideally, if you intend to bid for something, you should understand
the process that is being advertised for.
To add to Joyce's, you see, if you look at the fundamental law that we use and the regulations, the regulation gives specific timelines for some of the things. And a typical example I'm going to give is when a tender closes and we open. The next thing we have to do is an evaluation panel should be constituted to work through it. And very often it is stated that 2 weeks after the tender opening, I mean, the panel should be able to meet. But then we think that, why the 2 weeks, why the gap? Because in the actual procurement process, when you finish with the tender opening, there is nothing more to be done.
So the next day, start the next day.
You can even, if you finish by 10 o'clock today, what stops you from even starting at 2 o'clock? Because the panel members who will be sitting are not those who came to open the tender documents. The worst is you can even start from the next day. And then this also hinges to what Eben was saying. If you have a procurement plan, then in your plan, in your source selection plan, you should have detailed all these timelines. So you know when this one closes, this is open. So while the tender is going out and it's not closed, then you would need to get the panel members in readiness such that immediately this closes, then the next day they can start the whole process again. And that could take, I mean, the complex one can go a little, but then with the usual, some of the routine ones could take about a day and two, And after that, if you also plan very well, after the third day, we could have the ETC already meeting and reviewing all the process. If they approve and they give their recommendation, it goes to the next level, approval is given, contracts should be awarded within 1 week after the tender is opened.
So that's how come the 6 weeks you mentioned.
We think it's just feasible, it's realistic.
Okay. So this summit you're having, it will be the third?
Yes, that's
What
correct.
are you hoping to achieve with the summit? Anyone can take it.
We are trying to create the awareness of the role of the procurement and supply chain management in helping government to execute its developmental agenda. That's what we are looking at.
If I can add on to that, the summit is under the theme Advancing the Frontiers of Procurement and Supply Chain Management Systems in Ghana.
Okay.
That is to say that how do we make the procurement processes, all the methodologies government uses in obtaining its requirement, open and accessible by the larger audience or possible potential suppliers to all such projects. And so that's basically what the team is.
For this year?
Yes, Advancing the Frontiers of Procurement and Supply Chain Management Systems in Ghana. It's a 2-day program, and a lot of activities are scheduled. For example, on the first day, there would be a paper to be delivered titled...
And the first day is the 30th?
30th, yes. 30th. The first paper is titled The Role of the Public Procurement Authority in Advancing the Frontiers of Public Procurement. The reason why we choose this topic is the Public Procurement Authority is the regulator, and it makes sense they're able to put in the public the things they have done to ensure people have access to government business. And then there would be another presentation on the topic, the use of available IT platforms to advance the frontiers of procurement and supply chain. There is almost a norm to hear suppliers complain they were not able to access a particular tender document because he traveled from Tamale to Accra for 11 hours, and when they came, he was told the tender document is finished. But one of the things that we are advocating is the use of IT. The Public Procurement Authority's website is available to access information. The Procurement and Supply Chain Management class also has a website, www.ggps.gov.gh, that we're going to use to make sure that live tender documents are made available, which is printable by any potential supplier. So suppliers need not travel from wherever they are to Accra, but they should be able to access this information from their locations so that they can access government business. These are some of the things we are seeking to discuss and bring to the fore, so that by doing these things, we're able to expand the frontiers and access to government business.
And Doc, I'll wrap up with you. You've done 2 already of this summit. Do you see the kind of results you're expecting to see from it? Because obviously, if you're coming up with a 3rd one, the 2 must have given you some results.
Yes, the 2 were very successful. I mean, the first one was when we even launched our scheme of service, to try to understand who qualifies to even practice procurement within government business. And the 3rd is no exception. And one of the good things that is going to happen this 3rd one is some of the things Eben has just mentioned, enumerated. And I think that there is one interesting bit which is also coming. You might have heard of the government talking about public-private partnership, PPP, and it's all over the place. But when we talk about PPP, have you ever wondered whether it's a procurement activity or whether the procurement professional even has a role? Don't forget, we're talking about infrastructural development. And when the government wants to engage even the private sector in infrastructural development, government pays. If government pays through the consumers, or government pays through the taxpayers' monies, it's still payment to the private sector. So then government would have to ensure that the process goes through the right and due process that has been laid out. And we think that procurement has a very strategic and important role in the management of this affairs. So the second day, you're going to see very interesting issues being discussed around PPP, and we're going to tell the role we think that procurement will have to be playing in it, and then we want to raise the game and raise our voice to make sure that we're positioning ourselves to help bring this PPP agenda into reality to the benefit of the country.
Okay, so where and when is it? The venue and the time.
It's happening at the Accra International Conference Center.
Okay.
We're starting at 8:30
Each day.
each day, and we're closing somewhere around 2 p.m.
Okay, so we wish you the very best, Dr. Waters, Joyce, and Eben. We wish you the very best, and
Thank you.
I'll also try and come around and come and learn a thing or two about procurement.
Please do, please do. We want all of you guys to come on.
Okay. All right. So that's it for our conversation on procurement, and of course it's happening at the Accra International Conference Center. So you can find your way there. They'll be there till about 2. So if you are working, at least by lunchtime, you should be able to squeeze in an hour or two at that time and learn something from there.